In this video, we'll discuss 5 areas in the face to assess sexual energy and dynamics in a person, as well as ideas for you to consider. Enjoy. Today's face reading tutorial is going to be about seeing sexuality metrics in the face. I get this style of question in the comments. People are asking about relationships, they're asking about romance, they're asking about sexual dynamics, how to see that in the face. So this video is going to talk about 5 key areas in the face that typically are good areas to look at in terms of assessing these things. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about sex, we're talking about romance, sex drive, those themes, and the natural offshoots that come with that. But those are sort of the core things to think about. In this video, we're going to talk about 5 key areas. The first one are the lips. The next one is the philtrum. Then we'll talk about the eyes, the eyebrows, and then lastly, the chin and the jaw. Before I jump into all of this, the thing I want you to remember, especially if you're new to face reading, is that when we are looking at isolated features or isolated areas, an isolated area or feature is going to have typical associated meanings. On average, in terms of pattern recognition, what people have seen over thousands of years. So when you hear me talking about a specific feature, don't think that if you see this feature on someone, it definitively means this about them. The part that's difficult about face reading is that you have to average out an isolated feature in relation to the rest of the features of the face. So if a person has, say, one area of their face that points to strong sexual metrics, the intensity of that signal from that single feature is going to be turned up or down depending on the other features of the face. So this isn't particularly easy, but the more you read faces, the better you get at this. But you sort of have to loosely and intuitively average out these things in relation to the other features. So again, please don't fall into the pitfall and the trap of face reading, which is I see a feature, therefore I make this judgment about a person, and therefore it means this explicitly about them. That's not how it works. These are general patterns, usually pretty strong directions to pay attention to and to lean into. That being said, let's talk about the lips. The lips are an earth element feature, and the theme for the lips is typically sensuality and desire. Now, sensuality is different from sexuality. Sensual relates to the 5 senses. This is why they always talk about the sensory dynamic component of the mouth. So if we're seeing full plump lips, typically this is a person who's pretty sensual and they enjoy physical intimacy. That doesn't mean just explicitly sex, but just physical intimacy, cuddling, touching, that kind of thing. Now, if a person has a strong Cupid's bow, the 2 points here are well defined. Typically, the person has a romantic nature, kind of by default, and they run a bit more flirtatious, or they like receiving flirtatious energy. Now, all of us like to be hit on here and there. It feels good if it happens. But typically, again, this metric is going to be increased more if that's seen. And then a full lower lip typically is someone who has a high sex drive and someone who's kind of hedonistic in their tendencies. So remember, when I'm talking about these features for all of these areas, this is a two-way street. These people typically like giving this energy or receiving it. So maybe if they have the Cupid's bow, and maybe they don't outwardly flirt a lot, but they really enjoy being flirted with. This is going to be true for all of these features. Now, the philtrum is the next area. The theme for this is fertility and sexual vitality. So typically, when we're looking for a strong philtrum, we're looking for depth, width, and length. Those are the 3 primary metrics you want to pay attention to. So the depth relates to the strength of the reproductive energy. So if you're with a partner and you're looking to make babies and whatnot, that's something to pay attention to. Pretty key information you might want to have. Now, the width usually relates to the intensity of the libido. The wider the philtrum is, typically the intensity and the drive of the libido is a bit higher. Now, the length relates to stamina in romance. That does not mean stamina necessarily in bed. What that means is in romantic dynamics and keeping that fire alive, typically that length relates to that type of stamina. Now, the other area is the eyes. The eyes relate to sex appeal and flirtation. So when the eyes run large, typically this is more about expressive sexual emotions. That means they like expressing sexual themes. They like doing that. They communicate openly if they're sexually attracted to someone. And then if they're small, the energy runs a little bit more, you could say, introverted. It's a little bit more about seduction and mystery when the eyes run small. So just think loosely, seduction and mystery kind of on the smaller side, and more open, direct, and expressive on the larger-sized people. people. Now, eyebrows. This relates typically to sexual confidence. So the eyebrows, if they're thick, and we're seeing that like really thick and really bushy, that's usually a very strong sex drive, and they're aggressive sexually, which means they're willing to make the first move. They don't mind being forthright and being direct when they're attracted to someone. And if they're well-shaped and arched, typically this is very confident in expressing sexual attraction. But they're a little more subdued than the thick eyebrowed people. So you want to think the thick is kind of like that, very direct, but usually can land, but it's very direct. When they're well-shaped and arched, they're confident, but that energy is a little more subdued, but they're definitely confident in doing it. So it still has confidence metrics in both, but the thicker is a bit more aggressive. The thinner and well-arched is a little bit more subdued. And the last area is the chin and the jaw. This relates to physical stamina, and this does mean in bed and whatnot. So if it's broad, prominent, or pointy, the stamina and persistence in chasing a person is very strong, usually. So when they have that, they're willing to pursue, they're willing to chase, and that broad this way, side to side, prominent visually, or again, pointy. Now, if it's very cut and well-defined through the jawline, this relates to lasting power in bed. This is usually a person who has a lot of physical stamina in the bedroom and can have very long sessions in the bedroom, and that's sort of what they lean to. So these are kind of the key areas to pay attention to. These are the basic metrics. Is this everything? No, it's not. Is there a lot more detail? Yes. But with these videos, I try to keep them succinct and give you basic framework and places to start from, sort of directions to start walking in terms of assessing. And then from there, you can always fine tune. So if you have questions or you want to know more about this, please put the comments down below. And as always, thanks for your time.